All right. Looks like we are live. Um, Hi, my name's Joaquin Watai. I'm the author of the book PTSDog, Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder and the Service Dog. Do these live Q&A videos in order to help spread the true information, the correct information, and help share knowledge so that people can be educated about service dogs, about PTSD service dogs, and how they can help in healing, and understand the laws regarding service dogs. Unfortunately, a lot of people take advantage of those laws because there's a lot of lack of understanding, a lot of misunderstanding about what those laws say and what they entail. Today, we're going to talk about hotels. Hotels are quite possibly one of the most challenging places when you have a service dog to access, because a lot of hotel managers, a lot of hotel owners, a lot of hotel staff have absolutely zero training and zero knowledge when it comes to service dogs. And this can be very, very frustrating. I have personally been denied access to motels on 4, maybe 5 occasions. 2 of which were at one particular chain, and we're going to discuss that chain, and I'm going to call them out. Not to call a fire mission, but because we need to encourage this chain to do some education, because their people don't understand the law and are denying access to service dogs, to people who have service dogs on a regular basis. So we're going to get right into this. First of all, remember that a service dog is a dog that is specifically trained to perform tasks in order to assist their disabled handlers in their day-to-day life. The service dog must be under the handler's control at all times. The service dog, again, must be specifically task trained, and the service dog must be housebroken. That is what the law requires. That is all that the law requires. The law does not require certification. The law does not require registration of service dogs. And anybody who tells you anything different is mistaken. They are misinformed. They do not know the law. I'm going to drop a link right now. This is one of the easiest documents to read. It is the questions and answers about service dogs and their regulations from the Americans with Disabilities Act. This one document gives you all the information you need to answer questions, to handle an access issue, and it even points you in the right direction of where to report if you are denied access. That Q&A is a lifesaver, and it comes from the government website. It's ada.gov, so you know this is what the law says. That's important. People will go, well, I went to servicedogs.org and it says. That's not the law. That's not the government website. That is not the place that has the actual law. The ada.gov.gov website is the government source. If anybody tries to show you anything different, they're wrong. So I got a message to the page yesterday or the day before from a gentleman who tried to check into a hotel in the middle of the night, it's usually the way it happens, and was denied access because he had a service dog. He tried to inform the person that they were mistaken, that they didn't understand the law, and that he was well within his rights. The person then produced a false service dog registry printout and said, this registration certification card is required by federal law. You cannot check in here because you don't have it. I'll read it I will read it to you directly from the law. This is directly from the ADA website. Does the ADA require that service animals can be certified as service animals? No. Covered entities, meaning hotels, restaurants, stores, movie theaters, Covered entities may not require documentation such as proof that the animal has been certified, trained, or licensed as a service animal as a condition for entry. Let me read that again. Covered entities may not require documentation such as proof that the animal has been certified, trained, or licensed as a service animal as a condition for entry. That is straight from the federal government website regarding service dogs. Then it goes on to expand on it. There are individuals and organizations that sell service animal certification or registration documents online. These documents do not convey any rights under the ADA, and the Department of Justice does not recognize them as proof that the dog is a service animal. There it is, clear as day. Certification, registration, ID cards are not required. The government does not recognize them as legitimate. Why? I could sit down and with a little bit of time in Microsoft Word with their certificate they have the pre-made formats already ready and make a really fancy, really official looking certificate proving that Skater is a service dog. What does it mean? Absolutely nothing. It's not worth the paper it's printed on. The proof is in the pudding. The proof is in the dog's behavior. If the dog is quiet, focused, attentive to their handler, performing tasks, the dog's a service dog. And hotels are one of the most difficult. And from personal experience, because it's happened to me twice, I've got two different people who have contacted the page about this. I'm going to tell you, for some reason, the Days Inn chain, the Days Inn hotel chain, has the most problems with franchise owners and managers not allowing service dogs access to their hotels. I was denied access at a Days Inn in Tennessee 2 years ago because my service dog, service dogs are allowed, but only up to 20 pounds. No, there is no breed restriction according to the law. You can't tell me I can only have a 20-pound service dog. That's illegal. Second time I was denied access at a Days Inn, they said, no, you dogs are not allowed. You cannot stay here. Again, it's against the law. So the hotels and motels are covered under Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act as public entities, and a service dog is supposed to be allowed to go with their handler wherever the public is allowed to go. There's a caveat to that, and this is in the law, so I'm going to talk about it because I actually had a question about this the other day. So we're going to continue to talk about hotels. Question 29 on the Q&A is, are hotel guests allowed to leave their service animals in their hotel room when they leave the hotel? The answer is no, and rightly so. The dog must be under the handler's control at all time. If you can leave your service dog and not take them, why do you need a service dog? That service dog is there to help assist you with things that you would be unable to do were the dog not in your presence. The dog performs tasks for you that you are unable to do. With a PTSD service dog, for example, creating a buffer, blocking. A very common task for PTSD service dogs is to create a physical buffer, creating space between the handler and other people, because people getting too close can start to set you off and stress you out. Perfect example. You can't do that by yourself. Your dog provides that for you. Hotels must allow service dogs. Hotels cannot. Let's read all the hotel ones. Question 11. Can hotels assign designated rooms for guests with service animals out of consideration for other guests? No. A guest with a disability who uses a service animal must be provided the same opportunity to reserve any available room at the hotel as other guests without disabilities. They may not be restricted to pet-friendly rooms. Had a couple contact the page not too long ago, I believe it was in November, who had reserved and paid for a room at a bed and breakfast, a hotel. The bed and breakfast purported to be pet friendly. Well, they reserved the honeymoon suite. They said, I have a service dog. I will be bringing my service dog. When they got there, they were denied service. They said, well, your website says this place is pet friendly. And they said, yes, every room but the honeymoon suite. Well, that's discrimination. And just as I read from the law, the disabled person who uses a service dog must be afforded the exact same opportunity as any able person to reserve any hotel room, and the same as anybody else. They cannot discriminate and only allow people to stay in pet-friendly rooms. The second question about hotels: can hotels charge a cleaning fee for guests who have service animals? No. Hotels are not permitted to charge guests for cleaning the hair or dander shed by a service animal. However, if a guest service animal causes damages to a room, just the same as if you cause damage, then the hotel is permitted to charge the same fee for damages as other guests. Hair shed and dander is not damage. The door scratched up or a lamp knocked over, something like that. That's damage. Anybody would have to pay for that. So, it's 2:30 in the morning. You've been driving for 7 hours. You're exhausted. You've gone, 450 miles that day, however far. You just need a place to stay. You pull in to the hotel, no-tel on, Route 67 and want to check in with your service dog, and they say you can't stay. What do you do? Well, I can tell you what not to do. Getting angry and escalating the issue does not help. Understanding the law, having a copy of the frequently asked questions printed out and available, that's a place to start. If they refuse service and refuse service and refuse service, get the name of the person at the desk, get the name of the hotel chain, and go somewhere else. Motel 6, dog friendly, period. All Motel 6s, every room. There's another major chain that's dog friendly, which I can't remember at this time. Motel 6 is usually one of the least expensive places when you're on the highway traveling as well. So go to the Motel 6. Keep that information. You have a couple of options. You can call corporate yourself, explain the situation, a third chain, explain what happened, and ask that this be fixed, that they do some education. This is what I did 2 years ago when I was denied access in Tennessee. I called Days Inn corporate Monday morning. Okay, La Quinta and Red Roof Inn are also pet friendly, Brian and Steven say. Anyway, I called Days Inn corporate and I said, I'm disabled. I was denied access with my service dog. I had to go stay somewhere else. And I don't want anything special for this. I want the hotel manager and staff to be educated so this doesn't happen to another veteran. Because you know what? Some of us can handle stressful situations really well and deal with it. Some of us can't. And I've been guilty of losing my temper and yelling at a hotel clerk because they refuse to obey the law. I've done that. I've lost it. The second time I was denied access as a Days Inn, I was exhausted beyond belief. I just needed a place to sleep, and I lost it on the poor clerk. I did. Well, the first time, I got a nice letter apologizing from corporate, a nice letter apologizing from the franchise manager, and a reimbursement check for the cost of the Hotel 6 room or Motel 6 room that I stayed at. So they ended up paying for my room at the other motel, and they expressed that they would educate their managers and make sure that this didn't happen again. It happened to me again 4 months later in Seattle. Actually in SeaTac, at the Days Inn at SeaTac. That was where I was told your dog's over 20 pounds. You can't come in. Again, I contacted corporate and it went nowhere. Did I want to pursue this with the Department of Justice? I did. I reported it to the Department of Justice. They decided that it wasn't egregious enough for them to pursue. They wrote a letter to that particular Days Inn and said, you violated this man's rights, and they didn't pursue it any further. I can't guarantee that the Department of Justice is going to chase up on something or is going to follow up on something. But here's what my plan is. Again, I've been contacted twice with people denied service at Days Inn from the page. So I have an established pattern over 4 times, twice to me, once each to 2 other people, of denial of service at a Days Inn chain or franchise motel. I will be contacting corporate Monday morning as PTSDog, as the author of a book, as a veterans advocate, and start a discussion with them about developing corporate training for their franchises, and most of the time these are franchise owners, and uh, a lot of times it's a cultural issue, but it's still illegal. Whether it's of that person's culture or not to allow dogs in the hotel doesn't matter. The law says a service dog is to be allowed to accompany its disabled handler wherever they go, with a few exceptions. You can't go into the kitchen at a restaurant. You can't take your dog into the pool, but they are still required to allow you access, equal access, just like anybody else, anybody who's not disabled, anybody able-bodied. So I'm going to start that. I'm going to start that discussion with days in. I'm going to offer the possibility of doing physical training, going to the corporate retreat with a service dog, and slides, and explain the law, because it's really simple. These people who are denying access are denying disabled people's civil rights. And especially when it's cultural, there's no excuse for it. If you are in America, you have to follow America's laws. And America's law says that a disabled handler is allowed to bring their service dog into their hotel room. If you've had access problems, bring it to the page's attention. I have a really nice letterhead, a PTSDog letterhead. I can link and quote directly to the law. I can write it formally and be as non-confrontational but factual as possible, and I'll be glad to advocate on your behalf for with hotels and hotel chains to discuss training and access. Hey, Josh, how you doing, buddy? That's part of what PTSDog is here for, as a resource, as an education, as a place where people can come to find out what the facts are and to then have access to resources to share those facts. Which brings me to the next point of our discussion. And, I feel like a broken record talking about this. I apologize, but this comes up over and over and over again. An emotional support animal is not a service dog. According to the Americans with Disabilities Act, an animal whose sole function is to make their handler feel better by their presence is called an emotional support animal. That is not a trained task, and that is not a service dog. Service dogs must perform physical tasks, even PTSD service dogs, even psychological service dogs. We need to stop drawing those lines. Either a dog is task trained, able to behave in public, and fully housebroken, or it's not. If it's not, it is not a service dog. Doesn't matter if you're disabled. Just because you're disabled does not make your dog a service dog. Hundreds and thousands of hours of training. That's what makes your dog. Hundreds and thousands of hours of training. That's what makes your dog a service dog. Your dog trained to perform physical tasks, in the case of a PTSD service dog, physical tasks to intervene in psychological symptomology. Your dog picks up on your anxiety. Your dog picks up on your stress. Your dog physically responds with an alert or a warning to you that you have taught it to perform when that situation arises. That is a task. It must perform trained tasks. Only one is required by the ADA. Technically, if the only thing Skeeter did was wake me up from nightmares, but he was able to behave in public and fully potty trained, technically, he's a service dog at that point, because I am disabled. As his handler, I have the right to use that dog. Skeeter does far more than that. Like I was saying earlier, he creates a buffer zone for me. He blocks for me. He watches my sits when I'm in a crowded area. He creates the personal space around me, which the only way I'd be able to create myself is shove people out of my way, which, this gets frowned on in society. There's no such thing as an emotional support service dog. It's either an emotional support animal or a service dog. Do service dogs provide emotional support? Absolutely. I would be lying if I didn't say just Skeeter's presence is calming, but he's trained to perform tasks above and beyond that. And it's that task training that sets him apart and designates him as a service dog. The other part of that is both emotional support animals and service dogs require their handler to be disabled. If you are not disabled, I don't care how well trained the dog is, it's not a service dog. It's there to perform tasks for its disabled handler. If you're not disabled and you have a really highly trained dog, that's fantastic, but it's still a pet in the eyes of the law. You have got to be disabled. That's the law. So I don't care how well trained your dog is. I don't care how well behaved your dog is. If you don't have a disability, you have no right to have a service dog. And it is not considered a service dog in the eyes of the law. Nika. Okay, Nika, yes, we'll talk about that. We will talk about that. Nika asks, hang on, let me pour myself a little more coffee. Nika asks, can you talk about how you handle all the unwanted attention when you walk into a public place with your service dog? I struggle with not wanting to be rude, but I'm also not able to always be sociable without massive anxiety. Very good point, Nika. Very, very good question. How do you handle all the unwanted attention? That's tough. That's tough because there is a lot of unwanted attention, especially when you have a service dog that is of a unique breed, such as Skeeter. Not many people are used to seeing a 100-pound Alaskan Malamute walk into Walmart, for example. And it's disconcerting to them. It's unsettling to see such a big dog, and then to see how incredibly well behaved he is. And so I get constant comments. I get constant questions. I can't. What usually would be a 20-minute trip through the store usually takes an hour. How do you handle it? How do you handle it? Well, first and foremost, trust your dog. Listen to your dog. If you are starting to spin up, I call it, if your anxiety is starting to overwhelm you, I would hope that you've trained your dog to alert to that. If the dog is alerting to you, listen to the dog. I know one friend of mine taught his Alaskan Malamute service dog to play dead, to bang, and the dog would flop over like he was dead. He did that to disarm those kind of situations. So when he's too stressed and it's too much, he looks at Denali, his dog, and goes, bang, and Denali plays dead. And everybody fawns over Denali and turns away from him, turns the attention away from him. It's a unique solution. That's one of his solutions. Usually, Skeeter, when I'm getting too stressed, he pushes me away. I taught him to push me away from the stressor. And he'll pull. If it really gets bad and I just can't seem to extricate myself from a situation, he'll pull me away. And a lot of people, well, that's disobedience. He shouldn't be doing that. No, I taught him to get me away. That is one of his tasks, is to remove me from the situation if I'm unable to handle it. Your number one tool in that situation with your PTSD service dog is that your dog will perform tasks to help alleviate those anxiety-causing situations. So the first thing you can do is train your dog tasks that will help. I am trying to remember who. One of the handlers who's on the page taught her dog to ask to go outside when her anxiety started getting too high. Oh, I'm sorry, I got to go. My dog's got a potty. That's a perfect distraction technique. You cannot train your dog to show aggression. The DOJ is very clear about that. There is no room for protection training in service dogs. So what you do not want to do is teach your dog to growl or bark at people to get them to back away. That is considered counterproductive, and in the eyes of the Department of Justice, it violates the ADA. So you do not want to do that. But again, Skeeter creates that physical buffer. One of the things I like about having such a large service dog is people are naturally wary of him because he's so huge. He's about half the size of almost anybody that approaches us. Um, and So what I've taught Skeeter to do is to wait. He doesn't greet people until I tell him, say hello, and it's okay. And that's one of the things you can do. What I did was teach Skeeter not to approach people until I gave him permission. And when I'm unable to, when I'm having one of those days where I can't, um, I just can't handle the people, I can't handle the interaction. I just politely say, I'm sorry, we're busy, we're working. And I keep going. I shut them down. I'm not rude about it, but, oh, can I say hi to your dog? I'm sorry, we're working. Please don't distract him. And we keep moving. Um, oh, nice. Josh taught his service dog Grunt a safe word. When I say fire in the hole, he knows to get me out of the situation. There's almost no shame in ignoring people. Just remember, try to stay positive when talking to people. You may be the first person they have ever seen with a service dog. That's absolutely right, Josh. A lot of people don't understand service dogs, and they're just natural. They just want to understand why is their dog here, you know? And it's innocent. They just genuinely don't know. Um, but not everybody's able to handle the education, and it's not. Some of us choose to educate, but it is not a requirement if you handle a service dog to educate people. It isn't your job. Um, one of the other tools you can use is the little ADA cards, the little fact cards. I'm getting ready to print another run of mine. I've got people who want some. There are a couple of them that are available on Amazon. Make sure that the phone number, there's one out there that has a phone number that is not to the ADA. There's and I've seen that some poor lady has that number and keeps getting calls asking for the ADA, and she's not it. So double check if you order a card, one of those series of ADA cards on Amazon, that it is the one that has the actual correct phone number. But yeah, you can hand out the little fact cards and say, it's a service dog. Please don't distract him. Here's some facts, and just keep moving. I've done that in the past. I was coming out of the grocery store, just got my shopping done. Skeeter needed to pee. We'd been in there for about 45 minutes, and had one of the attendants come charging up. Oh my God, can I pet your dog? And I said, we're in the middle of something. We're busy, but here's some facts about service dogs for you. Brand new grand opening of the grocery store, and that was enough to distract him and focused his attention on the card and away from me and Skeeter, and away we went and finished our project, got loaded up in the truck, and got out of Dodge. The best thing I could tell you, Nika, is plan actions, plan responses that you're able to perform under stress, and practice them. Practice them with family. Have your family act like they're the crowd so that you can get those responses down pat, and do those responses and keep focused. Imagine you've got blinders on. You got blinders on. You're moving forward. You've got a mission to perform when you go in there. Your dog has a mission to perform, and those people are not a part of your mission. So you can choose to keep moving and just politely say, please don't distract him. We're working. And we're working is probably one of the most effective things I can say when somebody wants to stop us and pet Skeeter, and I'm not in the mood that day. I'm sorry, we're working, and keep on going. People who walk up and start trying to pet him without asking, excuse me, he's working, and keep on moving. That's another. But plan out responses. Practice those responses. Practice in the mirror. Practice it however you can, so that when you're under that stress, you can use that response and continue your mission. You're on a mission. You're there to achieve something. So you give that response and keep moving. The other thing, like I said, the other side of that is to educate, is to go in with the mindset, well, I'll teach these people. If they're going to ask questions, I'll know enough about the ADA to have answers. And again, that frequently asked questions document I linked at the beginning, I'll drop that link again. That's a very good, if you just read that a few times and understand what it says, know where to find it. It's linked on my phone. I pull it up right then and there. It has pretty much every situation you'll need as far as answered questions, access, and things like that. Yes, it is challenging dealing with all the people who want to pay attention to your dog because, oh my God, there's a dog in here. One of my favorite memes, in fact, I saw it again today, is a picture of two kids and a service dog in a store, and the kids are crawling in and out of the shelves, and it says, take your crazy out of control kids into the grocery store and nobody bats an eye, but you bring in a calm, highly trained service dog and everybody freaks out. That's exactly what it's like. I don't know why it's like that. People should understand and accept that a dog can behave most of the time well, much better than the children around the dog. But there you have it. And yes, it's distracting, it's difficult, it's very anxiety causing. And that's one reason when you think about, should I get a service dog? One of the things you need to think about is, are you going to be able to handle the extra attention? I didn't realize there'd be all that attention when I started working with Skeeter. Once I figured it out and kind of made peace with the fact that I was just going to have to deal with that when I was using him, I was able to move on and start to develop those planned answers, those educated responses. Is it easy? No. Listen to your dog. If your dog's alerting you, look, it's too much for you, just say, I'm sorry, we're busy, we're working, and away you go. And you know what? There are going to be people who say, oh, how rude. They choose to be offended. You weren't being offensive. You were being factual. I'm sorry, we're busy, and move on. It's okay to say, no, I really don't feel like talking to you right now. You're a stranger. It's okay to do that. There's no reason to feel anxiety for saying we're busy. You're busy. You're there to grocery shop. You're there to do this. You're there to do that. You're not there to entertain the public because you have a dog. Josh says, having a service dog is like wearing a road guard vest and carrying balloons that say, look at me. It can be. It can be. My favorite times when I do something like go shopping, my favorite days shopping are the days where nobody bothers us at all. And, I hear the whispers. You're all going to hear, oh, my God, look at that dog. He's so big. Wow, I've never seen a husky that big. Skeeter's a Malamute, not a husky. But, those days, yeah, it's but the days where nobody actually stops us and we can just do what we're there to do. And a lot of it, Nika, put those blinders on, get that 1,000-yard stare on. You're on a mission when you go. You are going to this place to accomplish something. So get on that, get in that mindset, mission first. I don't have time for these distractions. I've got a mission to perform. I need to get in, get what I need, and get out. Setting yourself that mindset. It can be really helpful. It really can. Now, Nika, you bring up social isolation, and I have to tell you that Skeeter's the bridge that helps cure social isolation for me. I can spend days at a time not talking to people. But when Skeeter's with me, which is always, and I go to a place where there are people are going to want to talk to me. So I chose to look at that as an opportunity to unisolate myself, to find connections. I don't want to talk to some stranger about the weather or whatever. But I really don't have a problem talking to people about my dog. I can talk to you about my dog all day long. Because it's my dog, he's right there. He's a part of me. We're a team. We're together 24/7. We're always together. So, that's another way to look at it. It's all about mindset. It's all about how you think about it. Are these people making me more anxious, or is this an opportunity for me to create bridges and have discussions and interact with people where I would not be able to do so otherwise? That's the way I look at it. As far as I'm concerned, teaching Skeeter to wait and greet politely is one of his tasks that assists me in overcoming social isolation caused by PTSD. And there's no set list of tasks. If you notice on that ADA Q&A, it doesn't say what those tasks are. Everybody's symptoms are different. The way PTSD affects people is different. So the tasks you're going to train your dog to perform are going to be different. Your dog's not going to do the same thing my dog does and that guy's dog does and that guy's dog does. Because no two people are alike. No two people's PTSD are alike. No two people are going to do it exactly the same way. Service dogs are individually trained. The law says that, individually trained to perform tasks. Individual tasks, individual dog, individuals with disabilities who need X, Y, and Z tasks to be performed. And that uniqueness is, I think, another part of why it's important to either self-train if you're capable of it, or cooperatively train where you work with a trainer, but you're responsible for the dog 24/7, especially for PTSD service dogs. You need that connection. All right, do we have any other questions? Oh, let's go back to the ESA versus service dog issue. Emotional support animals have, let's break it back down. Okay, the Americans with Disabilities Act is what defines and created service dogs legally, okay? The Americans with Disabilities Act is the law that created the service animal and the protection for the disabled handler in order to bring the service animal wherever they needed to go and assist them while they are there in public places where dogs normally are not allowed, such as restaurants, movie theaters, grocery stores, banks, things like that, okay? The Fair Housing Act is the first of two laws that is the only place an emotional support animal is defined. The Fair Housing Act guarantees access to disabled handlers of service dogs and disabled people who have an emotional support animal, so that they cannot be denied housing in pet-free housing, in animal-free housing. Affords them the equal opportunity to rent as anybody else. The other law that defines an emotional support animal is the Air Carriers Access Act. And there was big stink. We talked about that last week with Delta's new rules for access with an emotional support animal. Those two laws, the Fair Housing Act and the Air Carriers Access Act, are the only two laws that define emotional support animals. The only protection emotional support animals have under those laws is to accompany their disabled owner in housing, in any housing where they would choose to stay, or to accompany their disabled owner on an aircraft. The handler or owner must be disabled in order to have what is actually an emotional support animal. If you do not have a disability, you cannot have an emotional support animal either. The Americans with Disabilities Act defines the service dog for its disabled handler. ESAs are not allowed to go into federally. Thanks, Stevie Six. I will address it. Federally, we're talking about federal law here. ESAs are not allowed to stay in hotels. ESAs do not have the protection service dogs have in hotels and motels. They are considered pets. If it is not pet friendly, you cannot take your ESA in, make a stink, and say, well, it's my service dog. It's not. DV6 made the point in the comments. Some states do give similar rights to emotional support animals when it comes to things like housing, hotels. Some state laws expand upon the ADA, but state laws cannot confine the ADA more. They cannot restrict the rights that the ADA provides or guarantees. If a state law is more restrictive than the ADA, it is against federal law and will be challenged and changed. But I know for a fact Ohio, dogs, cats, miniature horses, monkeys, and I think birds in Ohio can legally be called service animals in Ohio. That expands on the rights of the ADA. Um, some states don't change anything. It reads almost identical to the ADA. Um, Also, service dogs in training are not protected federally. Some states, again, expand on the ADA and afford the same access rights to service dogs in training. If you live in a state that does not afford those access rights, um, go train your service dog in pet friendly places. I'm going to drop a link in here. This is linked to a document that is in the PTSDog group in the files. This is a link to a website. It is not a government website. However, this website does have it's on the legal resources reference document in the files folder in the PTSDog group. This website, as far as I can tell, because I've used it a couple of times to find specific states' laws, I have gone to the states' laws and read them, and as far as I can tell, this site is very accurate in regards to what states' laws are for service dogs in each state, and it breaks it down state by state. So check out that link if you have a question about your state. Every time I've used it to find the links to the state's laws, read the actual law from the .gov website, and it has seemed to be pretty accurate. Yeah, Josh says Louisiana's service dog in training is almost the same access rights as a service dog. Depends on your state. But if you're training your service dog and you don't have the same access rights for a service dog in training as you do a service dog, go to pet-friendly places. Go to Lowe's, Home Depot, the PetSmart or Petco. Go to outdoor events like street farmers markets, things like that. Places that are open that are going to be pet friendly, tend to be pet friendly. You can get that public training access in without going into places that will be overwhelming to a dog or to a young dog, a puppy, if you're trying to work on that kind of training with a puppy. That goes, Josh. You've been training dogs for a long time. When would you say a service dog in training becomes a service dog? When would you call that? And I'm just curious to see what Josh says. Give him a minute to answer. And I'm going to tell you what my opinion is according to the law. I'll tell you what my opinion is while we wait for Josh to answer. The law says a service dog must be trained to perform a task to assist a disabled individual, and that task must be related directly to that individual's disability. The law also says the service dog must be under the handler's control at all times. The disabled handler, if you're not disabled, it's not a service dog. And the law says the dog has to be thoroughly housebroken. Now, in my experience raising dogs most of my life, personally, I would never, ever call a dog under 18 months old a fully trained service dog. Simply because I've gone through the stages of development with puppies many times. And I can tell you, up until they're about 18 to 20 months old, right in between the 1.5 and 2 year range, they're still going through all those different adolescent issues that puppies go through. And Josh says 2 years old and 300 hours in public training. And that's what I'm getting at, Josh, is if you're going to tell me that your 9-month-old Labrador is a service dog, because he performs this and this and this task and he acts this way in public, I'm going to tell you by the time the dog's 12 months old, you're going to be talking about washing the dog and starting over, because you're putting too high of expectations on too young of an animal. Dogs do not settle down until they're between 18 and 24 months old. That's 1.5 to 2 years. Dogs do not get focused and mature until at least those times. And even then, it's up to the individual. Now, there are individual cases. If you can show me an 18-month-old puppy, because they're still puppies at 18 months, who's gone through adolescence, who's gone through the rebellious teenage phase, who's gotten all of that out of their system and can stay focused and consistent in public, then that individual animal might be able to be considered a service dog. Okay. But in general, anything under 2 years old, I'm gonna argue that it's a service dog in training, simply because the animal is not mature. And even at two is a young dog. When I started taking Skeeter in public and working with him when he was 2 years old, we still had some issues. And that leads to the next fact, is that training never ends. Dogs age and develop as they age and change as that goes on. Their psychology changes, their knowledge changes. They gain more, just the same as people, not in the same ways or the same. They don't have the same intellectual processes as we do, but dogs grow and change. Their needs change. Their abilities change. A puppy might be able to go, a 2-year-old dog might be able to go run 10 miles with you 3 times a week and not have a problem. A 7-year-old dog might not make it 2 miles. You have to adjust to your dog. And they change as far as what their tastes, their preferences, what they tolerate. The older Skeeter's gotten, the less tolerant he's gotten of too many people crowding him. And he'll push people away if they get too close. He'll go lean against them and shove them back, which I don't discourage. People are crowding him, and if they ask if they could say hello, and I'm in the mood and I say yes, I say it's okay, then they asked for it. So if he leans against him and starts shoving him back to get him away from daddy, that's on them. They asked for it. He's not being aggressive, but he is certainly expressing his opinion. Training never ends. You've got to develop that mindset. I'm sorry, I don't care who tells you this is a fully trained service dog. The service dog is never fully trained. It is a living being that's going to change and grow. Its needs are going to change. And you, as the handler, have to be able to be perceptive of that. You've got to be able to deal with that. Skeeter is 7 years old now. And just in the last week, we've been working on off-leash at 7. I haven't done that before with him. And I don't do it in public, just because there's just too many people around. And if something did happen and he got distracted and wandered away, it could be crazy. Josh says it all depends on the handler and the animal. I have complete confidence in the team when I train others and their dogs. I give a fully trained dog to the veteran, and if they don't keep up the training or understand the dog will forget all the training within a month. That's exactly right, Josh. It takes both the handler and the dog to keep up the status of a service dog. That's absolutely right. And you know what? That goes back to the difference between a program-trained dog and an owner-trained or a cooperatively trained dog. I don't know of any programs where a third party trains the dog and then you go get your dog. Most of those third party programs, training programs, you go to them for about 3 weeks. The first week is spent just going through the 12 dogs they have ready to go and see if one connects with you. And then you get 2 weeks of training of how to handle your dog, which might consist of 2 or 3 hours a day for 2 weeks, for 5 days, and you get the weekends. Okay. So basically you get 10 days of training of how to handle a service dog. And then those programs complain that they have a really high failure rate. Why? Because you only gave that person 10 days to figure out how to work with their dog, with their teammate. Whereas if you do cooperative training or if you owner train, you're with the dog 24/7. Your dog learns how to respond to you and how to preempt those anxiety and PTSD-driven activities, because it sees it happening. It picks up on your cues before you realize you're dropping those cues. And then you train the dog when you see that it naturally responds, that it naturally picks up on that. You train it to perform a task that will assist you in stopping that anxiety attack from coming or redirecting your energy. And you start to work together as a team, and it's a cooperative thing, and it's built together. And it's not a matter of, well, this is how you train your dog and you learn like you're learning to drive a car. That's not what it is. You create a team, you build teamwork, and you two, you and your dog, begin to function as one. The best way I can explain a PTSD service dog is that service dog is a mental prosthetic. Just like if you lose the lower half of your right leg, you get a prosthetic leg, and that fills in the gap. In the same way, PTSD causes your brain to short circuit in certain ways. You can train your dog to perform actions that distract you from those short circuits and enable you to work around those problems and fill in those gaps. The dog becomes the filter that your brain has lost. And your response to the dog's trained task that is designed to redirect you from that instant connection between what you perceive in fight and flight. Instead, draw your attention to your dog because it's alerted to you. You're starting to spin up. You're starting to freak out. Enables you to function where before, without that assistance, you were unable to do so. And you know, I'll go back. We talked about this, I think, 3 or 4 episodes ago. We talked about the argument that a lot of people in the psychiatric community say is that a PTSD service dog is just a crutch. No, it's not a crutch. It's a prosthetic. It's a mental prosthetic. Your PTSD service dog is Jiminy Cricket on your shoulder saying, are you sure that's the route you want to go? How about we look at doing it this way instead? Yay, knock stuff over. That's what I get for pouring coffee without looking. Your PTSD service dog is the mental equivalent, the physical equivalent of a mental prosthetic. You have to learn how to use that. It takes the guys who get the false legs hundreds of hours of physical therapy, a lot of time to learn how to walk on that metal appendage that's replaced the one they lost. They spend hours and hours in the gym reteaching their body how to work. Well, in the same way, if you're using a PTSD service dog, you've got to spend hours and hours relearning how to function using that prosthetic, that dog, to help fill in the gaps where your brain is short-circuiting. It's not something you can learn in 2 weeks, and that's one of the biggest drawbacks of the programs. I have nothing against program-trained dogs for a lot of other reasons. You know, you may have somebody who's physically disabled, who's in a wheelchair, who's unable to perform the physical tasks needed in order to train a dog. And a program dog's great to help that person, but it's not a PTSD service dog. It's not the same functions. But again, we need to look at changing. One of the things that I said last week when we were talking about the Air Carriers Access Act and the new Delta rulings, one of the things we need to change is that we need to stop making that distinction. Well, it's a psychological service dog, or it's a X service dog, or it's a Y service dog. That's not the way the law is written. And when you draw those lines like the ACAA does, you are creating a false you're creating a false barrier that then the user of the PTSD service dog has to overcome that doesn't exist anywhere else, just when they're trying to fly in a plane. That's discrimination. That's saying that mental health disabilities are not as important or as protected as physical disabilities. That's not why the ADA was written. That's not why the service dogs, PTSD service dog specifically, was defined in the ADA. Those dogs were defined in the ADA in order to remove that discriminatory thinking. Yes, my book is called PTSDog, and I talk about PTSD service dogs, but I talk about service dogs as a whole. And a PTSD service dog, although it performs specific functions, is still covered by the exact same laws and the exact same rules as any other type of service dog. Mobility assistance, hearing assistance, seeing eye dog, all are covered by the exact same law with the exact same words. There is no distinction. We need to stop making that distinction even in our own minds. This is not my PTSD service dog. This is my service dog. PTSD is the disability he assists me with. He also assists me with mobility. I broke my back when I was in the military. I have degenerative disc disease in my lower spine. There are things I cannot physically do without Skeeter being there to assist me. My body just doesn't do it anymore. But that's not his primary function. But he performs that function too. He is a service dog, period. No distinctions. And that stigma, we've got to overcome that stigma. The government doesn't care what your disability is. It cares, are you disabled or not? That's the question they ask. Why are we drawing all those lines and separating ourselves and making all these little clicks? We're shooting ourselves in the foot and creating our own problems as a whole, as a community, when we do that. And the only way to overcome it is to learn, is to educate, is to be educated, is to discover, is to hear the stories of our fellow veterans who handle service dogs and how that dog helps them. Not why the dog helps them, just what the dog does for them. What it has done to change their life, what it has done to create, to give them different ability. That's something my mom said when the VA said, "Well, you have a disability now." My mom said, "Are you disabled or differently abled?" It's all about your mindset. Well, I'm missing the bottom of my leg, so it's harder for me to walk, but I put on that fake leg and I can walk. I'm not disabled, I'm differently abled. I've got PTSD. My brain doesn't function in the same way that somebody who doesn't have its brain functions. I jump from this is happening in front of me to fight or flight response immediately. I panic, I get anxiety, I get rage attacks. Am I disabled or am I differently able? Do I need to learn ways to understand and overcome what's going on in my head? And what tools can I use to do that? Well, there's two tools: drugs or a service dog. That's the primary treatment. There's a couple other things, EMDR, counseling. Those are tools. They can help you learn to develop those same or similar coping patterns. But the PTSD service dog is a physical tool that physically helps you to overcome the things that are going on in your head mentally. That's about all I've got. I've got some coffee to clean up to take care of. Before I go, as usual, I want to send a special thank you out to the folks at Dysfunctional Veterans. Without DV, I wouldn't be here. Without them picking up what I was putting down, so to speak, on Facebook and sharing it and asking me questions and reaching out to me when I was just beginning, I would not have the audience that I have today. I very much appreciate the support that Dysfunctional Veterans gives me, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am to Mike, DV6, and the team for all the things that they have done to give me help and help spread the word about PTSD service dogs. The PTSDog is a way to help reduce the number of veteran suicides by giving those veterans the tools they need to overcome the disabling effects of PTSD. That's heavy. That weighs on me. We've lost quite a number of veterans recently who are in circles that I'm in, and it's unnecessary. Is a PTSD service dog right for everyone? No. But can it help a lot more people if they're able to get them? Absolutely. And you know what? The VA is making it as hard as possible for that to be the way that you get help. They'd rather throw drugs at you and pacify you. So you know what? As a community, we need to do it ourselves. And that's what this is about. That's what PTSDog is about. Us taking care, veterans taking care of each other, taking care of ourselves. Nobody else does it better than we do. Nobody understands it more than we do. That's all I've got this week. Thank you very much. I will see you again in 2 weeks, I believe. Unless we get another major development like we did last week with the Delta Airlines ruling. Again, if you're having any problems with getting access to places like hotels, feel free to contact the page. I will do everything I can to assist you. I've got some admins around. We'll try to get you, get you some help real time if possible. But as always, you can always reach out to the page. Go to the resources, the files in the PTSDog group for links to all the laws. It's all readily available for you there. And that's all I've got. Have a good rest of your weekend, and thank you very much for joining.